Today's narration is a Hurt and Comfort found family fic featuring BakuDeku. The Stories Beneath Our Scars by Loopy Loopy. Summary: Izuku and Eri bond over their scars, and Katsuki has something he needs to say. Chapter 1: Eri's Scars. The door clicks closed on the chilly January evening, Aizawa shucking his coat and toeing off his shoes before helping Eri out of hers. She's gotten better with Velcro and zips as her coordination improves, but buttons are still a bit of a challenge. He can hear the babble of conversation drifting through the common room and feels her grip the back of his trousers as they step out of the Genkan and approach the open area. She's been like this for the past few days. Quiet, teary, clinging to his legs and side, introverted, almost back to the first days following her rescue. Although he had tried to understand what was the matter, she had kept her silence, and Aizawa would be lying if he said he wasn't worried about her. The only thing to coax even the slightest hint of a positive response had been when he'd asked if she'd like to go see Deku. So he'd called him, and of course the kid had agreed immediately, eagerness to see her tamped by concern and desire to help, as his teacher had explained the situation. Izuku had offered his time easily. Maybe he'd be able to understand what had upset her. Now, Eri stands in front of him, eyes drifting nervously from his face to the couch for a moment, but she's quick to clamber up when Izuku smiles, warm and open, and pats the cushion beside him. As she wraps her little arms around his waist and buries her face in his side, Izuku shares a worried look with the watching Aizawa before carefully pulling her against him. With a nod of thanks, the teacher withdraws to check on the small groups studying quietly at the tables, not wanting to crowd the pair. Izuku thinks he hears Kirishima ask what's wrong, but he's almost deaf to everything but the little girl curled tightly into his side. He waits, breathing purposefully calm and heart rate slow despite his running mind, as he feels the tension ebb from her somewhat. Finally, she raises her head enough to peek up at him, and he offers a smile, one she's used to by now, full of tenderness and care. "Hey, Eri," he whispers. "Are you okay?" There's a hesitance, a long moment of indecision, and then she shakes her head, the tiniest movement before she once again hides her face away. He doesn't press. Instead, he just waits until finally, "I hate my scars." The admission is whisper-soft, so quiet Izuku barely hears it over the sounds of shuffling papers and Momo's voice, but it drops a lead weight on his chest. His lip finds itself caught between his teeth, and he worries it, trying to think of how to say what he wants to. But he can feel her start to tremble, as if she's afraid she's about to be punished for her honesty, and that loosens his tongue. "Scars aren't nice," he sighs, a melancholy smile on his face as she peers up to meet his softened gaze. Izuku flexes his hand, looking at his own stripes, turning it over to let her see clearly. Almost on instinct, she reaches out and holds his fingers, absently running her own over the gnarled flesh. Sometimes, he pauses to think for a moment, searching for the right words. Sometimes scars have bad stories, but they show the world just how strong you are. After all, you made it through whatever the bad thing was that gave you those scars. She hums softly, and Izuku can tell by the pinch of her brow that she doesn't believe him, not entirely. So he changes tack a little bit, shifting to take his hand back so he can pull off his brace and roll up his sleeve. There's a reflexive change in the atmosphere of the room as he exposes the discolored flesh, a hitched pause in conversation, even a hissed curse, but he ignores it all, focused solely on the girl next to him as her eyes widen. "This scar has a bad story too," he explains, running a thumb across it. "I was fighting someone. He was really strong, and he wanted to hurt a lot of people." "Like him?" She interrupts in a tiny, frail voice, burrowing back under his arm as if her words alone might summon Chisaki to the dorms. Izuku nods with a quiet hum, petting her hair to help ease the worry between her brows. She falls quiet again, returning to her gentle manipulation of his fingers, like it's a distraction, a coping mechanism, he finds himself realizing. Yeah, exactly. He and some other villains attacked our summer camp, and he swallows against the memories, but doesn't allow his voice to falter. We all had to fight. I hurt my arm, and it's scarred like this. He makes sure to meet her eyes now, really wanting her to understand. I was really scared. His admission is quiet, like a secret just for them, and Eri looks like she wants to interrupt him, but he can see her holding herself back, so he continues, his own eyes tracing across the ruined flesh with the haze of unpleasant memory. Sometimes when I look at it, it makes me feel bad, but I try to remind myself that we made it. All of us fought, and we won. It doesn't always work, but that makes it easier for me. She hums again, pointing to the scars clawed into the hand she's still absently playing with. How did these happen? And so he explains how he earned those helping a friend, and pulls the collar of his shirt to show her 3 thin scars just under his collarbone, chuckling as he recounts the story of the cat who absolutely did not want to be saved from that tree when he was 8. Sometimes scars can have good memories attached to them too, he explains. Or even just silly stories like saving grumpy kittens. In the face of everything, Eri actually giggles. It's a wan little sound, but Izuku's heart sings, eyes stinging in response. There's still something weighing on her, though. Izuku can see it in the way she picks at the cuffs of her jumper, and he has a sickening feeling he might know what it is. Swallowing past the tightening of his throat as he broaches the subject, cautious but kind. Hey, do your scars ever hurt, Eri? Her eyes snap up to meet him, shining with tears, as she tries to figure out how he can possibly know that, and he barely holds back the urge to wince. It's enough confirmation to tighten the queasy knot in Izuku's gut even further. Mine too, he admits quietly, but I think I have something that might help. Flashing a grin far more confident than he feels, he stands, opening arms that she readily climbs into. With Eri balanced on one hip, he approaches the table where Aizawa is crouched, helping Uraraka with something. A few of his classmates call quiet greetings to Eri, but she buries her head in Izuku's shoulder, hiding herself away. He cradles the back of her head, offering an apologetic smile as Aizawa disengages to join him a little ways off from the group. Eri, is it okay if I tell Aizawa-sensei what you told me? Izuku asks kindly, waiting out the long moment as Eri weighs the decision before nodding in assent. And so he explains how her scars have been hurting her, and how Recover Girl had given him a special salve for his own. And when Eri says she wants to try it, Aizawa gives his consent, feeling a surge of pride in this kid. How he offers her options and waits for her agreement. His calm demeanor as he promises to be back in a minute. The way he encourages her without forcing as she tentatively releases her grip from around Izuku's neck and latches it around his instead. Yes, he muses, he's definitely grown. Soon, they're set up on one of the couches, facing each other. Eri worries her sleeves in her hands, anxious about exposing her scars. But Izuku just uncaps the salve, letting her smell the faint herbal scent, before he shows her what to do using one of the scars on his hand, and offering her the tub to practice on another, and another, until she's confident. He doesn't press to let him help her with her own scars, or to lift her sleeves, but finally she feels brave enough to pull one of them up and expose a few of the thin, scratch-like marks, dabbing some of the salve on her finger and rubbing it into one that's clearly been paining her. And the sheer relief in her eyes when she turns to Izuku almost makes him cry, a few tears almost spilling at the awe in her voice. It worked, Deku! It worked! She throws herself on him in her excitement, hugging him fiercely as he scrubs at his eyes, before looping his arms around her in a gentle hold, just enough to let her know that he's there, that he has her, as he murmurs how happy he is through the bass in his voice. With the movement, though, Eri spots another scar under his shirt, a wide swatch of mottled skin across his collarbone, and the question is out of her mouth before she really registers. "What happened there?" she asks, pointing to the corner that's now exposed. Izuku scrunches his neck to see what she's talking about, and his heart sinks. He doesn't want to lie to her. "That's a really old one," he huffs, with just a hint of melancholy behind the warmth. "A friend of mine had an accident with his quirk when we were younger." He notices her furrowed brow and the way she chews at her lower lip, an action he finds himself mirroring until he realizes what she might want. "It's not a bad scar," he reassures her. "It was an accident. He didn't mean it." That seems to mollify her, and she tucks her head back under his chin, but he can almost hear her thinking until she leans back, a shy request whispered in a tiny voice. "Can you help me with the rest?" He tilts his head, eyes scanning her face, searching for any hesitance. "Are you sure?" he asks, and she nods fervently. "Do you think we should teach Aizawa-sensei too?" he asks. "He can practice on me like you did, and then he'll be able to help you with any that you can't reach." She nods, and Izuku is quick to call him over, explaining their request and running his teacher through the steps. But as he's about to practice on his hand, Eri interjects, offering her own wrist. And Izuku watches Aizawa's expression change at this display of trust, the tiniest of smiles lifting his lips as his brows twitch in surprise. The hesitance returns as she pulls up her sleeves, exposing all of the razor-thin scars, but Izuku just cradles her free hand, murmuring how brave she is, and telling her stories to make her smile as they apply the salve. The common room has fallen pretty much silent around them, his classmates having left to give them some privacy, for which Izuku is immensely grateful. "All done," she finally announces, popping the top back on the tub and smiling up at them both. Aizawa ruffles her hair, coaxing out a disgruntled huff as she tries to squirm away. Izuku can't help the little chuckle that escapes him at the sight of her pouting at his homeroom teacher, and she responds with a giggle of her own. She cuddles back in against Izuku's chest, and he can feel her slackening towards sleep. "Okay, Eri." Aizawa beckons softly, patting her shoulder to get her attention, and tilting his head towards the door. "It's time to go." She murmurs in assent, and Izuku helps her down off the couch. He gives Aizawa the salve to take a picture of, and walks them to the door, helping his teacher fix the little girl's coat and shoes from her position now snuggled in his teacher's arms. Aizawa reaches for the door, but turns back at the last second. "You're very good with kids, Midoriya," he praises flatly, leaving no room for the argument he knows his student will try to counter with. "That'll stand to you when you're a pro. Good night." Good night, Sensei," Izuku blurts, taken aback. Aizawa merely hums, closing the door behind him and leaving Izuku to ponder the events of the evening. Offering a small smile in their wake, Izuku stretches, flicking off the lights in the now deserted common area and heading up to his room. End of Chapter 1.